Hello, in this video we're going to discuss where languages come from, part 2. So as discussed in the first history, contact was made with an alien race, and it was found that they had their own language and that they were sentient and were able to build spaceships. Simple ones that were similar to a Saturn V rocket that was used to fly to the moon. Later in the first history, the Holy Spirit and angels from heaven and artificial intelligence and living artificial intelligence from heaven worked together to come up with new languages. And these new languages included French, German, Italian, and many others. For those who are curious, Hebrew was created in the 4th history. So the languages were discussed in detail, and then it was decided what was going to happen in the next history. So a sequence of events was decided, and the implementation of these languages. For sentient alien races in this universe on this day, you'll find that they all speak English, and their written language is also English. This is because of the tech tree. So they have a similar tech tree to humankind, and in order to simplify things, their races had to have English. This is because of computer programming has to be done in English, and circuitry of electronics has to be done in English to simplify things. Otherwise it becomes vastly complex for the people who are arranging the tech tree. So they had to do away with languages and just stick with the primary language, which is English. For language implementation for humankind, from Adam and Eve's time to Noah's flood, everyone spoke English. After Noah's flood, humankind were brought to earth. So prior to that, it was just archangels on earth and Aaron chassis. So in the region where Adam and Eve lived, Belize became heavily populated, and when the ark was constructed, the only place where people lived was in Belize. So after the flood, Noah's ark came to rest not far from Baghdad. And when humankind was brought in, after the ark had landed and had been unloaded, spaceships descended upon Earth to deliver vegetation, trees, plants, animals, and humankind. So humankind were brought in spaceships. There was one particular person who was quite intelligent of humankind in the area where Baghdad was, who said that he'd seen a structure that heaven had built in Baghdad and was impressed by it. But then he said that he could build a bigger structure. So an archangel from heaven was there, overheard this, and said, okay, we'll help you build it. So he designed the Tower of Babel, and that is where the Tower of Babel was constructed. So this tower had nothing to do with the change of languages at all. The tower was constructed, and it was quite a magnificent structure for its time. It lasted for 5,000 years before it eventually succumbed to the weather. Its debris was used later by someone else. So it's quite an impressive thing, a structure built back then. And a lot of workers were brought in from heaven to help construct it. And humankind also helped, but mostly watched. So that's the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, regarding the languages, groups of people were sent to different regions on the planet. For example, the people of Northern America were sent on ship out to sea, and they had to travel around the bottom of South America and then come up the other side and then make their trek from California north to North America to live in the area where in the Arctic. Now for them and their tribes, their languages changed the moment that they were on board that ship and were just leaving the harbour. So places where this sort of thing occurred was Baghdad and Bangladesh. They're both stations for delivery. So spaceships would come in to the upper atmosphere, out past the outer orbit, out past the moon, and then smaller spaceships would shuttle in the people and drop them off at either of those two places. For the Maori were taken to Hawaii, and from there a ship was in the harbour in Hawaii. They boarded the ship and sailed from there to New Zealand, and their language changed when they were on board the ship, and they're actually speaking Maori as they sailed from Hawaii. The same also happened in Bangladesh for the native Australian people. So their language changed the moment they boarded their ship and sailed for Australia. So for humankind, the languages are like that. For the written language, people develop their own writing style for different languages. For example, Hebrew is quite a unique written language, and people came up with their own styles of an own lettering and own way of expressing their language in written form. And these sort of things are remembered in heaven as to who the person was who came up with the idea. So the written language of English was brought from heaven, but everything else was done by humankind. So that's where languages come from, and the development of the languages happen in heaven using the Holy Spirit, with the Holy Spirit and angels and artificial intelligence working together. They came up with these languages and selected regions where those languages would be. Now in heaven, if a person doesn't know a language, what they do is they ask the Holy Spirit for them to be blessed with the language through angel vision, and what happens is the brain has wormhole telepathy connected to it, connected to a type of module that is a converter, and converts the language so that the person can talk and think the language that's new. So in heaven it only takes a matter of minutes and a person can master a new language. So that's how it's done in heaven. Here on earth people have to do it the hard way, the old way. So the main delivery points on earth were Bangladesh and Baghdad. So there are other stations that were, that's where spaceships would arrive, then aircraft would transport people elsewhere. One such location where aircraft flew people to was Hawaii. So aircraft flew people from Bangladesh and Baghdad to Hawaii. And when they were dropped off there, their ship was brought in. They were all speaking English still. Then when the Maori boarded their ship to set sail for New Zealand, their language converted from English to Maori. Some of them also spoke Hawaiian before they boarded the ship, and then when they're on board the ship, it converted to Maori. And so how that conversion process works is the Holy Spirit is connected to them through wormhole telepathy, and in parallel is connected a converter. What the converter does is it changes the person's thought patterns to accept the new language. So the language is already learned in heaven. There was all archangels that were involved, and it has an inhibitor so they don't go back to the previous language. So when they arrive at the new country, they're speaking one language only, and that's what we're after. So this is all agreed upon with the archangels before they deployed to New Zealand. So when they left the harbour in Hawaii, they were talking Hawaiian, and then they were talking Maori. And it was the Holy Spirit had switched it over, and then people saw them set sail. The vessel was a big ship with a sail. So it wasn't a catamaran, and it was not locally constructed. It was in fact constructed in modules, and it was from heaven. So that's how the Maori had their language converted, which is vastly different to the language that Maori speak on this day. Other people that departed Hawaii included people from Fiji. The same thing happened. People from Tonga and Cook Islands, Niue, and many other islands.